It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
We want our kids to love learning, and homework seems to be a pretty reliable way to help kids to hate learning and undermine their curiosity. Plus, we want them involved in life after school. We don't want them coming home and having to pull a second shift.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Well, we're starting another week with a big topic this morning. Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm here with my wife, Kylie, mum to our 6 kids. I'm the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. Thank you so much for joining us for the Happy Families podcast. Today, a whole lot of school issues, and this is born out of a couple of things. Number one, a friend of mine, you may know her, Rebecca Sparrow, wrote something really provocative, really engaging on Facebook last year, and I've been holding on to it until today, around the expectations that we have for our children and schooling. We're going to get into the weeds here and talk about some important things about homework, but also those expectations for our kids as they get older and what we demand of them academically, whether it's good or bad. Then we're going to talk about the latest news coming primarily out of New South Wales as a review into school hours commences, and there's talk of changing the hours so much that it's going to completely revolutionise the way school happens. Kylie, the comment from Rebecca Sparrow, can I read that to you and then we'll talk about that?
Let's do it.
A friend of mine, says Rebecca, took her son to a Year 7 orientation the other night at his soon-to-be new high school. Remember, this is last year, and I've held it off until now. The parents and kids were told that there was an expectation that kids would be doing 90 minutes of homework per night. 90 minutes of homework per night for 12-year-olds. Has the world gone mad? Asks Rebecca Sparrow. She says, I wasn't doing 90 minutes of homework in Year 12. So that's our first topic of conversation. But let me add the second thing that she's shared in this post. She said, meanwhile, another friend has a child in Year 12 who is now madly trying to memorize all kinds of information for the upcoming ATAR exams. What possible benefit is there in forcing kids to memorize all this material? It's 2021, for Pete's sake. And a Year 10 girl I know said she's planning to do the Suicide 6 in Years 11 and 12. That's the nickname given where you choose to do physics, biology, chemistry, English, Maths B and Maths C in your senior years. And then I love this insight. Beck says, I see all this talk about how worried schools are about our kids' mental health. I see politicians talking about it and education boards, but we are running in the opposite direction to what our kids need. Our kids' well-being and their future careers are not reliant on single scores at the end of Year 12. Don't buy into that message. Year 12 scores are about school marketing brochures and universities using scarcity as a tactic. There are so many different pathways to take after school. Kylie, what's your reaction?
I wonder as a parent how many things we worry about are actually unnecessary and cause added strain and intense pressure on our children.
Yeah. What a great summary of that. And education seems to be one of those areas where we do it the most. Can we talk about homework?
It is one of your, I want to say pet peeves, pet topics.
Yeah. I've been talking about this for a long time, haven't I? So let's dive into it. We're going to link in the show notes to the homework letter that we used to send to school with our kids. It's kind of just become part of our culture. And you know what? Like our family culture, I mean. And I've probably softened my stance since I originally wrote the letter. But basically the letter says, dear teacher, we love you. We're so glad that you care about our kids and that you're doing the great work that you do. Just want to let you know we're not going to be encouraging our kids to do homework. Now, this is for our primary school age children, right? We don't do this for the high schoolers. It's for our primary school age kids. And the idea is we're basically saying we want our kids to love learning, and homework seems to be a pretty reliable way to help kids to hate learning and undermine their curiosity. Plus, we want them involved in life after school. We don't want them coming home and having to pull a second shift. Let's get them outside playing, going to the beach, going to the park, riding their bikes, seeing friends, so long as they're not playing video games all afternoon or something like that. We really want our kids to be engaged in life. That's the essence of the letter.
And I think for the most part, as a result of the way we see things, our kids have had a pretty balanced childhood.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is
the neighbours and enjoy family time without that added stress and strain of having to meet deadlines at 6, 7, 8, 10. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they seem to graduate primary school and do okay. Like we haven't had any ducks of primary school, but I mean, who's really got that on their Twitter account profile, right? Who's saying I was the ducks of grade 6? I'm something special. That's not what it's about, right? It's about enjoying childhood.
I'm really interested on your take on senior years, because obviously you've acknowledged that it's a different kettle of fish that we're dealing with by the time our kids are in year 10, 11 and 12. What things can we do as parents to kind of help our kids find balance in these senior years when there is so much pressure to conform and to perform so that they can reach their goals?
Before I answer that question, it just occurred to me, I have never in my life seen a kettle of fish. I wonder where that came from. I'm sorry. Have you ever seen a kettle of fish? Actually, you're from New Zealand. You probably have.
I haven't seen a kettle of fish.
Okay, but I know that you've got some stories about fish heads when your uncle came to visit. So anyway, I digress. This comment that Beck has made, the Suicide Six, doing these 6 subjects that are so hard because you want to get a high score to get into university, the pressure to get those year 12 scores. I love how she says this is actually about school marketing brochures and universities using scarcity as a tactic. Here's what I know. I was a high school failure. I scored in the bottom 15% in year 12 in one of my subjects, and my overall score was abysmal. I was never going to get into university. And yet, in my mid to late 20s, once I'd sort of grown up a little bit and my brain was working the way it needed to, I went back to TAFE, and then I went to school, and I ended up getting a PhD. I did undergrad, then a postgraduate psychology studies and got a PhD. Didn't finish till my 30s. It certainly was a slow, hard way to do it, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I think that it made me a better student to go back later and have that. The idea that our children have got to get high scores so that they can get into university, and the only way to get into university is to get those high schools, is a complete falsehood. I utterly and totally reject it. Kylie, you will back me up on this. Our approach with our kids has been, we hope that you really enjoy year 12. We're not going to ask you to study. We're not going to put any pressure on you whatsoever. And we're going to encourage you to take a gap year or 2 or 3 and go to university when you know what you want to do and you're ready to do the learning.
That intrinsic motivation to learn is so important, or else it's just so hard. There's no other word for it. It's hard.
Yeah. So point made, Rebecca Sparrow. Thank you for your brilliant insights and for sharing what you've done. And hopefully the things that we've talked about just now support and add a little bit of weight around that. There's plenty of research evidence that we could quote, but I just wanted to share this and talk about it briefly because we're now into the school year and things are starting to heat up. The pressure is on. People are finally getting into that routine of school, and I thought it was worth discussing. Kylie, after the break, let's talk about something else that's been in the news lately. New South Wales talking about changing up school hours.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Are screens creating tension at home? Tweens, Teens and Screens is a webinar to guide families to healthy, safe super screen solutions. Buy it today at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And today we're talking about school, homework and school hours. New South Wales seems to be changing things up a little bit.
Well, at this point, they're talking about what it might look like to try to make school hours more useful for families. They're suggesting that 9 till 3 or thereabouts isn't really working for a lot of families. And from what I'm reading, Kylie, and I know you actually read more about this than I have, it seems like they're looking at bringing the school start back to about 7:30 in the morning and finishing early afternoon.
Well, look, when we were living in Wollongong, there was actually an all-boys school, Edmund Rice College, who were already doing that. And that was 10 years ago. And recognising that teenagers' brains work a little bit different to the way ours do.
Yeah, so I'm surprised by this because most of the articles that I've read over the last, let's say, 15 years have suggested that school times need to be pushed back later because teenage brains aren't awake enough to get the learning happening. So to see this push seems a little bit counter to what science, psychological science, brain science tells us about the teen brain. However, we've also seen that you can get your kids up nice and early and their brains can kick into gear and they can do their learning in the mornings. That's something that we do in our family anyway. So I'm not so sure how rigid that brain science is and how accurate it is and how much flexibility there could be around that.
I'm obviously not a teenager, but I know as an adult, I actually get so much more done when I get up early and I use those early hours to just, kind of get in and get it all done. And and then have the afternoon to relax. And so schools that are actually starting earlier obviously finish earlier, which means that from about 2 o'clock, the kids are coming home, they're able to have a break, they can do their homework.
Homework? Did you just say that?
Homework, unfortunately, it is a part of our lives, whether we like it or not. And our kids obviously are reading and spelling, even though we don't, do all of the worksheets and things. I feel like it just creates more balance for our kids.
What about for families where both parents are working, though? I mean, doesn't this make it harder, not easier? A 7 o'clock or a 7:30 drop-off, and what are you supposed to do with the kids at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock when school's over? How does that work if you don't knock off till 5 or 6? Like, I don't know that there's any easy answer here, but surely this is complicated, right? I mean, is it a good answer?
I think you're exactly right, Justin. There is no easy answer to this. In order for this to work and actually be embraced in the community, it would require an entire shift in the way we do life.
Yeah, like structurally. I mean, I'm really in favour of it in a lot of ways. Perhaps it'll encourage more flexibility in workplace hours. Maybe more parents will say, well, I'm going to work mornings, you work afternoons. Or do you know what I mean? Like this could fundamentally change, like you said, the way that families do life and the way even that the workplaces engage with their employees. What are they doing overseas?
So this was something that I actually found really intriguing. In Finland, which is often recognised as having one of the most progressive educational models, school usually starts around 8 or 9 and usually finishes around 2 p.m. But in Brazil, the school days often run from 7 to 12 p.m, with students typically heading home after school to share lunch with their family. So systemically within their community, it would suggest that families all come together at lunchtime.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Again, you'd have to be working out how work could be juggled around this kind of shift, but it's really, really interesting. Have you got any other countries? I'm going to guess that maybe it's stereotypical, but from what I know, I'm going to guess that the Asian countries are doing more hours, not less.
Typical school day in China lasts from about 7:30 till 5 p.m.
Wow. And don't they go to school like 6 days a week as well?
It doesn't say that in here. I have heard that, but it also acknowledges that children will often go home for up to 2 hours during their lunch break.
Oh, wow. Hey, that's interesting.
So they're actually not at school much longer when you take in a 2-hour lunch break than our kids are, but they've got that big break in the middle. And in some ways, it feels like it just drags the day out.
Yeah, in other ways, though, it might be a nice welcome break, although I can imagine going back in the afternoon would be pretty tough. I think our kids might resist that. Hey, we would really love to know what you think about this. Jump onto our Facebook page and let us know. We'll have a social post up about the changes and asking your take on what would work best or whether things should just stay the same. Can everyone just leave it alone, please? The Happy Families podcast, as always, is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. Tomorrow on the podcast, do other parents worry about how to let go of their eldest? Kelly Ovington sent us an email saying, my eldest is going to be 16 next year. I'm so overprotective. At what point do I let her make mistakes and learn from them? This is one that Kylie and I have got a lot of experience in, watching the kids grow up, and we can't wait to share some ideas on this topic. If you'd like more info about making your family happier, we'd love it if you'd check things out at happyfamilies.com.au.